Hello, everybody. Celia Waterhouse here. I want to thank you for joining us today. I know everybody's really busy, so thank you for taking the time out to listen to us on this topic of creating a culture that people want to be a part of with one of our OnPoint mentors, Paul Campbell. Paul Campbell describes himself as a father, as an executive, whose purpose in life is to mentor and to lead others in his everyday life to achieve the unachievable. And I have seen that in action. He's incredible. He's currently the CEO of Spartan Energy Services and has been president and CEO of many corporations before that. Paul has spoken all over the world on this very topic of building inspiring cultures, which is why I thought we could learn a lot from Paul about this very topic today. Now, if you haven't heard of OnPoint Mentors, we are a place where if you're looking for a mentor to help you through some business issues or life issues, you can find a mentor all over the world at onpointmentors.com. Or if you're looking to become a mentor and you want to do it very quickly and get your practice up and running, you can become a mentor quite quickly, and we have everything set up for you. So check us out. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for that intro. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing here too, Celia.
Oh, thanks.
What you and Faye have going on, it's exciting. I think this is going to really turn into something. I'm honored to be a small part of it.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Yeah, we're trying very hard to get some really good quality information and coaching out there. So I really appreciate you joining our team and being a part of this movement we're trying to create.
Yeah,
but, so we've got a really hot topic today on culture, right? So we want to create a culture that people want to feel like they're a big part of it. So let's go first with the definition of what does culture mean?
That's a great question, because I think when I look at, and so it's important to talk about filters here to some extent too. So I'm going to be talking through a filter of a CEO of aerospace companies and manufacturing companies. So that's where predominant my experience is, but I'm also a father, as you mentioned. And so there's a culture within my family,
right?
Also a friend, there's a culture within my friends. So it's a topic that like you said, I've spoken about, but I can spend a considerable amount of time thinking about it and actually even researching it. And the best definition I've come up with on culture is it's a set of groups, a group of people, and it's how they behave the vast majority of time, and the vast majority of them behave as well. So if you think of like even a conference that you're at, that conference for 3 days has its own culture. How does everyone behave? Usually everyone's quiet, they're sitting, they're listening. Everybody has a common story and a way of relating, if you will. And so what I found as a leader and what I spent a lot of time on is it's super important to get that kind of right and to get a culture right and make sure it's aligned with what you're trying to do as an organization. And it can be any type of mission and organization. So then that leads you to the second question of if culture is how the vast majority of us behave the vast majority of time, then what kind of culture do you want? What's a good culture? What's a great culture? And probably the best success I've had is usually I try to look through a filter of what kind of place do I really want to work at personally. I want to show up at work every day. And if I'm CEO of this company, I have a duty and really the platform to kind of create that space. And I think a lot of CEOs and a lot of leaders of organizations, whether it's a nonprofit or if it's a big business or if you some kind of movement or activism, they really don't spend enough time on thinking about what type of culture are we going to create and how do you even create that culture? And so what I've come up with over the past few years is a couple key steps and a couple key kind of principles, if you will, that I follow and I think about literally every day to some extent about, is this culture and going in the right direction and how can I influence it? And so over the past 15 years as a business leader, I've through that research and so on and so forth, we've come up with some pretty interesting stuff that I want to talk about. Great. I think the first principle for me that can be somewhat the most controversial, but it really it takes a lot of training, if you will, especially for somebody with my personality, is to assume that everyone in your organization has the best intentions.
Okay.
So many times in organizations, because once you get over about 150 people, organizations get really complex. That's been scientifically studied. And what a lot of leaders try to do is put in place policies and processes, which are really important, but the intention usually is to police people. And it's not assuming they have the best intentions. The best example I can give is, or one of the best examples I can give is that when I was at CEO of this aerospace company, the first week I was there, I noticed there were no cell phones on the plant floor. I was impressed. I was like, how do we do that? Like, how do we keep people from being on their cell phones? Like, I've had to have mine with me. I mean, mine's right here, right? I mean, and I was like, oh, we have a policy that no cell phones are allowed on the floor. And when I started talking to folks that this was impacting, I found out it was actually a big problem. People didn't feel trusted. So I spent just a little bit of time trying to find out, how did this policy get in place? This is going to tell me a lot. And what I found out is the prior CEO, who was amazing in many ways, was out on the floor about a year before, and he saw somebody operating a really heavy piece of machinery, or a dangerous piece of machinery. And this person was also watching a movie while he was doing it, which is not wise, right? So instead of going and dealing with that person, he went to HR and they put a policy in place, which a lot of CEOs and general managers and managers do, right? They put a policy in place that impacts everyone and polices everyone. And so we got rid of that policy, obviously. And cell phones did come back in. We knew they would. And we just started having conversations individually with people about what our expectations were around cell phones. And I know that might seem like a trivial example, but it had a huge impact on our organization.
Right.
So that's just one example of making sure you assume everyone has the best intentions. And then guess what happens? People start having the best intentions, right? Especially when you have an organization of a lot of people, over 100 people, they want to be part of something really special sometimes.
Right.
And when they have the leadership of that organization, assuming that they are good people, assuming that they have the mission in mind, they generally start to act that way. And the other beauty of this one is if you assume that when people don't have the best intention for the organization, then they usually come to the surface of the organization pretty quick. And you can find those people, and then you coach them, within the organization or outside of the organization, or outside of the organization, if you will. The other principle that I follow every day, and this is probably the second hardest one, if you will, from CEO perspective or manager perspective, is I spend a tremendous amount of time on people.
Right.
When I was in my 20s, long time ago, when I was in my 20s, I had a mentor of mine who was CFO of this big company telling me, he's like, Paul, if you ever become an executive someday, which, I'm sure you want to, at that point I did, you'll need to be spending at least half your time on people. And I thought he was crazy. At that time, I think I was a manager in accounting of this company, and I spent 95% of my time on like processes and figuring out problems, right? But as I went up and up in the organization and got more responsibility, I really took that to heart. And when you focus on folks and literally you're thinking through that prism and that filter, it really starts to have a huge impact on your organization. So another principle that really creates a lot of energy with an organization is just being a great citizen. So this is definitely from a corporation's perspective, but we would sit with our employees and have a discussion about what causes were really important to them. And it wasn't just me that was doing it. We really solicited their feedback, and then we actually went out and built our own nonprofit. We had two actually, and it was employee led. They had their own boards, but making business, at least from my perspective, more than just about profit, but also about being a good citizen, really brings people together, and they want to be part of something. Because I do believe people are inherently want to do good things, especially people that you're trying to attract to your organization, if you will. So So those are like some of the main principles. I can talk today about those if you want me to, but.
Right. Well, go back to your nonprofits that you created, because I do want people to hear what you've put together, because I just think it's phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about the nonprofits and the culture. How did that come to be a part of your corporate culture, these nonprofits?
So yeah, that's a good question. That's a good point. Let me talk about the school. We started a school at this one company that I was running. So we're out in a rural part of the United States, and I'd been there for about 6 months, and we were having a really hard time recruiting the positions that we needed into our organization, and we had a high turnover rate of like engineers leaving, if you will. And so we were probably 60 miles outside of the nearest metropolitan city. And, like any good CEO, my first 90 days, I kind of put a vision for the company together and presented to the board. And one of the biggest risks I identified for the company and impeding us from realizing the vision we'd put together, which was to double our market share, which was pretty radical at the time, is that we needed a quality of life in our where we were located as a manufacturing facility to improve, so that we could recruit more people.
Right.
Or we had to move. And so I presented that to my board like 4 or 5 months into the job. And then I just started digging more into it. So why couldn't we get really good candidates, and why were some of our best employees leaving? And what it really came down to was folks that cared about education usually also cared about the type of work we were trying to do. And we didn't have a strong education system in that community. And so the real changing point for me was I'd recruited a gal from Florida who was going to be our engineering. She's going to be an engineering leader for us. Right. And this was a no-brainer. This is going to be a huge promotion for her. I'd worked with her before. I was excited. And I found out that she had cold feet. So I called her, and she says, Paul, I'm not going to take the job. And what it came down to make a long story short, is she had 2 children that were getting close to high school. And the average ACT in the county where my company was an 18. And I don't know if you're familiar with the ACTs, but ACT and SAT are entry exams into American universities, right? And so the average 18 of an 18 is abysmal. Let me put it that way. It takes usually a 24 to get into college, and your max is 36. So just to give you some frame of reference. So I was like, that can't be right. An average ACT is 18. And she's like, my school system here in Florida where I live is not exactly great, but the average ACT here is a 25. And she goes, that's just too big of a jump. So anyway, she didn't end up coming with us, but I started digging more into it. And I thought, okay, if I could get our county to be like one of the best education systems in the state, in a very rural state, then I bet you we could probably recruit. So that's kind of the bet we took. And I thought that would be easy because I was naive and ignorant, which is sometimes a blessing, right? You can't get anything or figure things out, and then it's too late to turn around. That's kind of how this happened, because I got together with the local school board and school leadership of the public schools there. And I was just really shocked at how low the expectations were of rural kids with the leaders of that community and the leaders of that school. And so instead of, and also I'd been talking to quite a few employees about the education system that we currently had. They were really upset about it. So we went to the local school system and said, here's some money. How do we get our ACT from an 18 to 24? They basically told us to go away. They didn't really want any part of it. They didn't want our money. It was very bizarre. So we started our own school, is the punchline there. And it wasn't just me. I was the leader of the nonprofit that we started, but I had several people in the community. But more importantly, I had a lot of people from the organization I was working that jumped on the team and really tried to help me create this school. And we did. And now we've got, 4 years later, we've got an award-winning school that's pre-K through 12. It's recognized as one of the best schools in the state. It is, I'm no longer with that company I've left to start my own company, but that particular company is definitely recognized as one of the most admired companies in the state of Oklahoma. where I am. And a large part of that is the way the company came together and started that school. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a huge impact on the culture. Then there's the culture of the school that we can talk about on how we put that together and how we make sure we keep cultivating that.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that. How do you put together a culture from scratch, cultivate it so that people want to be a part of it, right?
Yeah, so on the school from scratch, to me, it all really started with a couple things. Being a good salesperson, right? So it's not every day that a CEO of an aerospace manufacturing company starts a school. So there was a little bit of an excitement just in general that started from there. And I did take advantage of that for sure. Right. So that the point in that is we were able to draw some really talented folks in the education world because they got a chance to work with me and our executive team at that company. And so it started with we hired a guy that had a Harvard master's degree that would have never thought about teaching in this community if it wasn't for this opportunity for him. So we brought him in, stage one. The second step was we were really clear in the foundation of the organization of what we wanted for our students. And it was vastly different than what other schools wanted for our students. And I personally took responsibility, if you will, to ensure that the organization had those goals and that vision of the organization in mind as we started off. So there is no like silver bullet other than we hired the right folks, and then we talk about those things of people having their best intentions. Like we talk about our students. We assume our students have the best intentions. So we have a pretty different cell phone policy than other schools because we assume our students have the best intentions. So we have a very different look at getting ready for adulthood than most schools. So it's things like that. I don't know if I answered your question. But.
No. It is always so fascinating to me how you start from something from scratch and build it from the ground up to get to a point where everybody wants to be a part of something massive.
Yeah.
And you literally have done that several times. And then you've also inherited cultures coming into different corporations as well. And how do you shift people's perceptions and thoughts and the processes within our already built culture?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it, I know a lot of it really comes down to caring about people in your organization. And the best way I know how to to show somebody I care about them is to really listen to them. Yeah. And so probably the best compliment I've gotten, I've gotten over time is that me and the leadership team I work with put in a lot of intention and effort to get to know folks in the organization, to treat them as equals, because just because I have a different role doesn't mean I'm better than you or you're better than me. And to really intentionally listen to someone. Like, what are they trying to tell you? Let go of your perspectives and your biases, which are impossible to do to some extent, but really try to get to know the person and listen to what their wants are. And one of the things I did that I've done before COVID, and I'll get back, is we'd have lunches with people in the organization. So at least once a week, I'm having a lunch with 10 people that's across, from VP of engineering to guys that run a $2 million machine that, on the floor. And one of the things I always said when I started those meetings is I'm really here to listen. And if you don't feel like I'm listening, I want you to say something to me. So being that intentional about it, but also saying, just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I'm not listening. Because a lot of times, trial and error. I had those lunches, and the feedback I got from those lunches when I first started was that Paul wasn't listening. And so I said, I brought that up. I've been told I don't listen. So I'm trying to listen. Tell me if you don't think I'm listening. But let's define what listening means too. So I mean, these are very interesting conversations to have. You know, a corporation that's trying to design an air conditioner for an airplane. It's not. It's not. It's not typical, if you
Yeah.
will. And that's probably the biggest advice I can give anyone that's being a leader, that wants to be a leader of an organization, is be intentional about the organization you want. So many of my peers don't even think about it. They outsource all this to HR and just assume HR takes care of it. And they spend the vast majority of their time working in the business and trying to help people make decisions and second guessing people, when your job to me as a leader is to really focus on the organization you want to build and the people that you have in place. You know, I spend a tremendous amount of time making sure I got the right folks in the right position. And it's sometimes not easy to work in an organization like that either, by the way. It's not about being nice. It's
Right.
not easy working for me. That's 100% true. So
how often would you talk to your employees collectively, you know, as a group, and keep in touch and stay engaged with them?
So we had like this pretty extensive 10-point communication plan that I shared with the company when I first started there. So I went around and talked to everybody. I had a meeting with every single person in the company, not one-on-one, couldn't do that, but the feedback I got back was that the communication was really horrible in that company. So I documented the 10 things I was going to do as CEO to communicate better for the organization. And then I asked them to hold me accountable. This is scary, by the way, to be that vulnerable with that many people. And then you got to go and do it. And so just as a couple examples, there was a quarterly all hands meeting where we try to get everybody in the same room. A lot of people would have to call in or video in for that too. But so we'd have a meeting, and it was just an hour and a half meeting. We served lunch. We laughed a lot. Every meeting started with, or at some point during the meeting, we talked about the vision of the company and the strategy of the company. And I talked to everyone in the room as if they were an owner of the company and what they would want to hear. And so I got a lot of good feedback on those that they really appreciated. We did things like emails, you know, and the status of the business, typical things that you do. But the things that really probably moved the needle for us were we would once a quarter have what's called a party on the patio, where we'd shut down the plant at 4:00, and then we all go out on the patio, and hopefully we got good weather, and we'd play some kind of like yard games or something. You know, it'd be like a lot of people out there. So, and I just made an effort to get around and talk to folks. So just spending quality time with each other. Those lunches were huge.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing 100 lunches a year with groups of 8 to 12 people. And some of the best ideas I got for the company came out of those lunches. And what was really important in those lunches, this is a key point, is I made an effort to wrap up the actions at the end of every meeting, usually with me taking an action. Like 99% of the time, it was me taking an action. And then I would follow up with whoever I needed to on that action. It wasn't always perfect, but we got pretty close to being perfect at it. And it was just huge for people. You know, and I actually learned that little trick from, not to name drop, but from a U.S. senator of all people.
Wow.
He came to visit our facility, and somebody had a question for him in our group. He gave like a 20-minute talk, and he said, "I want to write down your name and number, and I'm going to get back to you." And a week later, that employee came to me and said, "Senator Langford," his name's Senator Langford. Senator Langford, his team emailed me about this subject, and it was some bizarre land subject or whatever. And so the next time I saw him, because we got to see him quite a bit, I brought this up to him. I'm like, "I can't believe you did that. It's amazing." He goes, "Oh no, it's my job. It's job as a leader, Paul. You know,
That's
we got to follow
impressive.
up with people." Yeah. Yeah. So I'm like, you know what? He's right. I work for them just as much as they work for me.
So let me ask you, at these patio parties, because I know some cultures, for example, in Japan,
Yep.
they serve alcohol and they serve a lot of it, right? But when you are in a state of inebriation, it is acceptable for they call it salaryman or the salarywoman, so the employee to talk to their boss when inebriated and be very open and vocal. So was it like that a little bit over at your company?
Sure. Yeah, no, we had a keg of beer. So definitely some alcohol was flowing. And I wanted it to be like that and talked a lot about it. And, we never got to euphoria or whatever, but I wanted that kind of talk and candidness to be there even without alcohol.
Yeah.
And so we spent, and again, it goes just back to intention. We'd spend a lot of time talking about, are people being honest with us? Yeah. Are we getting the best feedback here? Are we hearing what we want to hear, or are we hearing what we need to hear? And those are two very different questions.
Right.
And when you come up with the attitude of trying to figure out getting the best information out of your employees so that the organization can succeed in the best way possible, if you come through that filter, you're gonna be way ahead of the game.
Right.
Yeah, because as you know, a lot of people will go through the filter of, well, it needs to be this way because I'm the CEO, I'm the leader.
Right.
And they don't cooperate with people in the organization who see things differently and see things in a more productive and a way for the organization than you can as the top leader, if you will. I don't know if that makes sense. But
so how do you, for example, you had hundreds of people working for you, if not thousands, and each person has their own individual, be it a religious culture, be it a ethnic culture, be it a family culture, and then you've got your corporate culture. So how do you ensure that the cultures kind of mesh together and you're satisfying as many people as you can, or was that not your intention, or how did you link the cultures together?
That's a great question. Before I answer that, are you getting what you want out of this?
This is fantastic.
Okay. I guess you can't say no because.
And then I'm going to have you continue on because I know you had several key points, and I don't want to interrupt. But we're taking this conversation where it wants to go.
We're doing great. I'm just so used to talking to you one-on-one. It's like I keep forgetting that we've got people watching. So I figure keep that in mind. I guess it's a great question. I've never thought about it, to be honest with you, that way. I've definitely thought about other cultures and how they influence the culture we're trying to create. The way I looked at it is somewhat ruthless, I guess, in that I got over fairly quickly on letting people go. It's not easy, but the point I'm trying to make is if you're creating this work environment and let's say you want integrity and curiosity and innovation and fun, those are your four common themes that you want to come up with. And I highly recommend you come up with 4 core values as an organization that you want. Every single organization I've had has had some core values. And we try to go back to those. So what it does is it gives you a common language to discuss and reference people. But if you got an employee that isn't fitting into that culture that you're trying to create, they're keeping somebody else that wants to be in that culture away from a position. And so I've never really thought about melding other people into the culture I was trying to create. I've thought about more of finding those people that want to be a part of the culture we're trying to create, if that makes sense.
Right.
So instead of adapting what we're trying to create, which we do, we didn't try to adapt for, like for instance, there's a really strong culture within our work community of hunting, right? I'm not for hunting at all. Like this is not my personality. It's not. That really never entered into our work culture, right? The kind of the hunting, and I see no need for it as an example. But in that community, we had an impact on the culture of that community. What you see now is a city that's absolutely thriving, and I think you'd have a hard time arguing that saying that our company didn't have a pretty significant impact on that
Right.
So that's been a pretty cool experience.
So the tough question is, so as a leader of a corporation, you can let people go that don't really gel with the company culture. So what if you couldn't? So let's talk about family culture or community culture or nations culture. So then we're forced to blend. How would you go about blending?
Blending. So
Blending cultures.
how do I personally blend them?
Personally, professionally?
Oh God, I'm a dad of 6 kids.
I know, that's why I wanted to go there. One day we'll have a whole talk just on parenting 6 children.
I'm a dad of 6 kids, and I've 3 mothers. So, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics here. It's not just my family; it's their, the mothers' families as well. So, God, that's it. Yes. So, how do I blend cultures together? I don't know. I think they just kind of blend on themselves to some extent when it comes to family. I haven't been intentional about blending like the cultures of. That's not true, I guess. One of my insane interview now, but one of my daughters is Asian. So her mother is an Asian lady, and her mother's culture has impacted my family. We eat a lot of authentic Asian food as a family, as an example. Not a lot, but we do that. So we honor her culture that way. So, I don't know. What do you think? There.
No, because I had this question come up to me. I sit on the board at the university here at the College of Music. And we have leadership, we have faculty, we have staff, we have board members, we have students. And trying to figure out a direction based upon, where the leadership is going and how do you honor that strategic plan. Yep. So I thought about this and I thought, well, how do you steer the culture in the direction of leadership? And what I came up with was you first have to understand what the mission is of the leader, right? Yep. Probably like your 4 core values, you said, or the intention of where you want to take the company. And then I started thinking, okay, we have to look at each individual, whether you're a board member, whether you're a student, whether you're a faculty, staff, to find out what their core values are.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking integrity, honesty, those types of values, kindness. I'm talking about what do they love to do? What is showing up in their lives every day that they're moving towards? So is it their family? Is it to be the best violinist? Is it, to be a great community member? And then I would link those values, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So how is, let's say, one of the directions of leadership is to foster, good musicians, excellent musicians at a certain level. Then how is my value of being a good community member, let's say, if someone had one, going to be linked? How will that allow me to be an excellent musician and vice versa, right?
Yeah, no.
So I would look at it from, you have to understand what the individual values are and link it to the leadership's values and the strategic plan of where you want to go so that everybody's on the same page. And if they're not, they tend to drop off on their own, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. I once heard actually our mutual mentor, Dr. DiMartini, was talking about how he gave a corporate talk at a huge corporation about values and linking values. And I think a lot of the people ended up quitting.
Oh, really?
However, they were the ones that weren't really productive to begin with.
Yeah.
And the corporate culture became more authentic and more on point by following what he was doing.
Is that you?
That's me, sorry.
No, okay. No problem.
That was our original time.
Sorry about that. I screwed that up. I think you hit something really important that I didn't really cover is how do you ensure, well, one of the key things in every organization I'm in is ensuring that everyone in the organization understands the vision and values of the company,
Right.
and that they hear it from me at least once. And the best way that I've found through trial and error is the first 2 weeks they hired into the organization. So we didn't always do it in the first 2 weeks, but we would have vision and values meetings where all new employees, whether they were executive level or this was a part-time job for them and this wasn't an interest to them, got an hour meeting with me, the leader of the organization, on here's the vision of where we're going. I talked about market share, and I really try to keep it in simple terms because that's really all I understand anyways. But I talk about like the business and market share and the vision of where we're trying to go, and then the type of behaviors. Really, that's what we're saying. When I say values, at least in this context, I really mean the type of behaviors the culture is demonstrating the vast majority of time. And so we would go through that, and then it gives you a reference point to go back to when somebody steps out of line of that vision or that value. Is like, hey, I know that a continuous improvement, which is always one of my core values, is part of what we're trying to do here. So saying one of the phrases I hate most in the organization is like, well, that's the way we've always done it. That's a criminal thing to say in any organization, really. But anyway, that's just an example. I've been reading I just read a really killer book called Sapiens. I don't know if you've read of that.
Sapiens, as in Homo sapiens?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
And it's and I don't want to ruin the book for you, but it's been a game changer for me. And one of the thesis of the books is that what makes Homo sapiens so unique and so powerful on this planet is our ability to believe in fiction and our ability to cooperate. That's the only two differences between humanity and, let's say, cooperate in large numbers. And we cooperate in large numbers based on the ability to believe in fiction.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it just goes through all these things that are fiction in our life. And when you think about it, like what that does for me, and we've heard Dr. DeMartini say this before and others, is nothing has meaning until you give it meaning.
Right.
And there is so much of that in our everyday lives. Almost all of it is made up. And so if that's the truth, then it ponders the question of, well, what do you want to create? What do you want to recreate? And to me, that just goes back to culture and broken record here, but being intentional and taking actions around the type of behaviors you want your folks to have will pay dividends beyond measure. And I just see so many leaders not even addressing it. And there are people out there a lot smarter than I am that could be a lot more successful than I am if they just took this tip. So hopefully they will.
So give me some more examples of how, because you're such a great leader. Again, I have seen it in action. Give me some other examples of how you can steer a company to do not a 180, but a 90 or a 160 degree turn, or however you want to steer them.
Well, I think about one of the companies I was at. We doubled our market share in 5 years. So when I got there, we had 25% of the market share. We were solid number 2. We had one competitor, and it just didn't make sense on paper why they had more market share than us. To me, I felt like if we exploited our strengths, we could really really take advantage of that. So I guess from that perspective, being able to see that is a skill, right? I didn't see it. I'll be really honest with you. I didn't see it. I talked to people that did see it, and I was, I guess, smart enough, if you will, to listen to them. So when I got there, this particular organization, the first 90 days, I did a tremendous amount of listening. I listened to the prior CEO. He had great ideas. He just couldn't get them executed because he didn't have the leadership skills. And then several executives within the organization had really wanted to take the company in a different direction. My point there is just after listening, going through the data, I realized that we were sitting on a gold mine and that we could do that. So then the next step was getting everybody to buy in on that. And so I took that as one of my personal missions, is to be able to get starting with people that work directly for me, to get them to buy in on this, that we could do it. And then to get my board of directors to buy in on it. And it took me 6 months to do that with this particular situation. I think when I first started, like the mantra, we're going to double market share, like my board probably thought I was going a little bit crazy, and maybe they made a mistake. They picked the guy that was, but once I laid a plan out and showed them how that we could do that if things fell in line, then I started getting them excited. Then I started getting others excited. Then we started putting plans together. At the end of the day, we ended up doing it 5 years later, along with the company, but they're well over 50% of the market share. It didn't turn out the way I'd predicted, but there a lot of things that we predicted did turn out. And I know, I'm going somewhere with this. I know that at least 50%, I got to believe, of the reason why we were successful is how focused and intentional we were on everybody understanding that we were trying to double market share. So when I talk about that vision and values meeting,
right?
If you were a janitor at our organization, usually within your first 2 weeks of the job, you're sitting with the CEO and he's talking about how we're going to dominate our competitor and double market share. And here's how we're going to do it. And here's how it applies to your job. So like the janitor, we have to have this place absolutely spotless. And we were, because when customers come in, that's part of our strategy, is that we're different. And so I would relay all those things and try to get it down to their job on how important it was. So again, we were just super intentional about what the vision of the company was and what our strategy to get there was. And we talked about it in your first 2 weeks of the job. We talked about it once a quarter. We definitely talked about it at my level every day. So anyways.
What drives you, Paul?
Good question. I don't know anymore. God. Life crisis or something. What drives me? Probably what drives me today is I think it's the best time to be alive ever as a human. And statistically, it's hard to argue with it. If you look at over the decades, it's hard to see it. But if you step back and look at millennial and what we have access to as humans, it's the best time to be alive by far. So what motivates me is, what can I do with the skills that I have to help humanity to evolve into where it needs to evolve? And right now what I'm focused on is creating jobs and business. I got a nonprofit around rural education. I grew up kind of a poor kid in Kentucky. My dad was a coal miner, and I think rural kids get left behind a lot. I'm somewhat involved in Black Lives Matter movement. I say somewhat. I'm a mentor to this incredible activist here in Oklahoma who's going to change the world. She's going to change the world. So that gets me up every day to be part of her movement in a very small way. And then I'm a dad and a painter. I guess that's my life. It's not what you asked, but I don't like talking about myself. You know that.
That's why I like to ask the questions. Can we go back to that really interesting? Well, it's all interesting, but how you play a small part in mentoring the Black Lives Matter movement. And I don't want to get too much into it because this is not a political interview or anything like that. But in terms of, creating culture and creating something people want to be a part of, and looking at different perspectives, and how, tell me what your part in it is and what your take on it is.
Well, it's technically not, just to be, because this is being recorded, it's technically not Black Lives Matter. It's an organization that's just now getting started. It's about, well, it really all culminated with the murder of George Floyd, like a lot of us who have gotten involved. So I've got a daughter that's heavily involved with Black Lives Matter over the past 5 years, and is actually going to grad school right now to be, she wants to abolish prisons. That's her agreement. So I've been keeping up with it there to some extent, but I got personally involved with this young gal because after the George Floyd murder, I felt like I needed to do something, and I didn't know what to do. So I thought I would still do a protest, and I did a march, and just saw this young lady speak, and I was just blown away by her authenticity and her vision of humanity and how it could be better. I've come to find out that there are a lot of early 20 something year olds, like my children as well, who have this amazing outlook on life. They're humanitarians, and I think there's a lot we can learn from this generation. I think there's a lot we can learn from every generation. I think that's something we get wrong as we grow. So many of people that are our age look at people in their 20s and think they're dumb, and what's happened to this generation? That's all bullshit. This generation that's coming up is amazing in its own way, and quite frankly, has a higher moral character than our generation, Celia.
Yeah.
In a large way.
Yeah.
And so the reason I got involved with this gal is, I wanted to be able to use my skills, because I'm good at some things just like everybody else. And so I've just been offering them to her in any way that she sees fit. In no way, I want to make this clear, do I have any of the answers on what we need to do to end the atrocity that's happened to mainly Black men in the United States. They're 3 times more likely to be murdered by a cop than me because of the color of their skin. So I'm not in there trying to lead this organization in any stretch of the imagination. I just want to make that really clear. So this is her deal. Anyways.
So again, the culture, I love talking about it, because I was talking to you, you were on your way out of the Grand Canyon with a few of your kids. You and I was at Yellowstone, you're at the Grand Canyon. We're trying to chat about setting this interview up. But you spent quite a bit of time in the last few weeks with your children. I don't know if it's all at once or bits and pieces, some here, some there. So the culture of the generation of your children, culture of our generation, and the culture of our parents' generation, and how we can all get along and how we can understand each other. What did you come, because you spent all day in a car with them.
Yeah. No. And we actually had several amazing conversations. And one of them was, how do we bridge the gap between our generations? And how do we start working together? Unfortunately, we didn't come up with any great answers. I do know that in this particular individuals that I was talking to, her 2 young ladies in their early 20s, my daughters, don't have any, and I see this a lot, there's not a lot of wiggle room. There's no wiggle room in some of their moral beliefs. As an example, the easiest one. In that generation's view, and I'll even mention my daughter here, if you're not an anti-racist, you're a racist.
Okay.
It's that simple. I think you and I have to grapple with that. I wasn't an anti-racist 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago. I just wasn't. I wish I could say I've always been an anti-racist, but I wasn't. So like, as an example, the impact my daughters had on me and me listening to them is, I said, okay, I'm going to be an anti-racist. I'm going to make that commitment. So we were in the Grand Canyon and we were at this tourist trap or whatever with masks on, by the way. This lady was going on and on about all her John Wayne paraphernalia. And I wasn't saying anything. And I thought, man, what would an anti-racist do here? And, John Wayne was a white supremacist. That's a fact. The year before he died, he's videotaped saying, I believe in white superiority. So he's a white supremacist. So what I'm thinking, what does an anti-racist do here? So I wasn't having these thoughts 8 weeks ago, but I am now because I'm associating with people that are a different generation, have different perspectives. So the lady finally says to me, after just talking to her, do you know they're trying to rename the John Wayne Airport in Orange County, California, and it's a shame. And I thought, shit, what does an anti-racist do? I'm an anti-racist. So what do I do? So I said to her, I was like, ma'am, he was a white supremacist. And my daughter was standing right next to me, just cheered. And it was great, good moment. So to me, I guess that's an example. I don't have any of the answers of just, trying to be better, right? I mean,
right. So if you said you don't have any answers, I mean, nobody has all the answers. What would be the first step as a leader and as someone who is influential and leads big crowds of people, corporation? How would you even begin to change a culture? How would you even begin to find a solution to something that big? There are a lot of issues out there, and John and I, when we go on our road trips, like we just came, we were just in Jackson Hole for a rally, for our Sprinter van rally. Everybody laughs at me, but
awesome. I love it.
We do not listen to music. We don't listen to podcasts. We
at the rally?
No, on the road trip.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we've done multiple road trips. We go all the way down from Boulder to San Francisco, San Diego, back through Vegas, up and around. We do not listen to any piece of music or podcast or anything. We sit there and try to solve the world problems.
That sounds awesome.
It is actually quite interesting because you always get caught in the, oh God, there's no solution. Yeah. Oh gosh, I don't know. But it forces you to go just that step deeper, right? There's lots of issues, homelessness, racism, politics and divisiveness and all of this stuff. And you're like, okay, how do we solve this? And we just keep talking and getting deeper and deeper. And then it takes us down this little rabbit warren. And then it takes us through this little rabbit warren. But it becomes quite fascinating. And, I don't like the idea of saying, it's just too hard. It can't be done.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin? Which is why, OnPoint Mentors, what I'm hoping we can do is start getting really smart people such as yourselves and get us in a room and let's hash out some of these really hard issues. And not stop at, it's too hard. Because there's enough of us out here that can take the lead on one little rabbit hole and another one can take the lead on another rabbit hole and come up with a solution that will make it a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, it's super interesting topic. I'm glad you picked it. The thing that's probably I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about is how technology is going to really impact all this. And I don't know if you spent any time, looking at what our lives could look like 20 years from now, or even, 40 years from now. But there's some pretty compelling evidence that says that Homo sapiens will be extinct anyways. So it's none of this matters, and that we'll all be cyborgs. Not to get off on a tangent there, but in all seriousness, I think a lot of these problems are going to be resolved through technology.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know how. That's a whole nother topic. What I don't think we're spending enough time on as a group, and I think this group could help with this, is what do we want as humanity? You know, we're here, however old we are, 100,000 years old as humans, and there is no grand plan. Like, where are we trying to go as a group? What are we trying to solve? What are we trying to accomplish? And I do think, as controversial as this is going to be, but we are on a collision course for a one world order. There is just no doubt. If you step back and look at it from a lineal perspective, we're exponentially growing faster towards that. Just 300 years ago, well, let's say 1,000 years ago, there were literally hundreds of worlds on planet Earth. The vast majority of humanity has spent in multiple worlds on planet Earth. If you were in Tasmania the past 12,000 years, just south of Australia, you know this.
Yep.
You thought you were it. You had no, that was it. That was the planet. It was that island. And so we've already come together as one world. And just because of the way economics work, we're probably not going to see a lot of war going here in the near future, at least massive war like World War II, because we've just set up the economic systems to prevent that, to be honest with you. But the question that I've been thinking about, and I don't have any answers on, and I'm trying to read from the brightest minds about it, is how do we use technology to become the humans and the societies and the cultures that we want out of this? And we got to define those first. It's fascinating that as humans, if you research this question, and I haven't really articulated it very well, we just now started thinking about this as humans. We didn't do a lot of research on this through the hundred thousands of years of humanity. It's really bizarre. We're just now coming to this, well, what do we want?
Do you have any idea what we want as humans?
Yeah, I think we'll look back, not to get too crazy on this. I think we'll look back and I'm already starting to do this personally and look at the 40-hour work week as something really toxic and stupid. Necessary, I guess, at some time, but I think there will be a time where we'll look back and look at how much fun we didn't have. Just humans in general. It'll be hard to manage working a 40-hour week, I think. But in all seriousness, I don't think we know what we want. Yeah, and I don't know if I even know what I want to do. I don't know.
Well, COVID's kind of changing that, the 40-hour work week.
Huge. It's huge. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah.
I really am. I see a big change in my peers. I'm a lot more joking, a lot more questions about, and it might be short term, but more questions about family.
Yeah.
I got a call yesterday from a guy who's having a board meeting. This wouldn't happen 8 weeks ago. He's having a board meeting and he's scared to death that they're going to ask him about Black Lives Matter and what his opinion on it is. Because fairly conservative board. And it just opened up this conversation for us that was just so rich, right?
Right.
And just his perspectives change. He's all for it, right? He gets it. He gets all the goals of Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth. But that and the George Floyd and the COVID thing are really awakenings that we needed to have as a society.
Right. Well, things happen when society needs it, right? The universe just provides it for us. So
I actually love the question or the comment, all lives matter. I don't like it when people use it because it's generally to offset Black Lives Matter, which is racist. But it is a question. It is, yeah. all lives do matter. Why don't we have that perspective? Why are we working on immigration and making that easier? And anyways.
Anyways, any other pillars of wisdom on culture? I know you've had 7 keys or 8 keys to creating culture that you want to share with us.
I think the continuous improvement one I didn't really talk a lot about, but is something that's really powerful. Is that your organization is always looking to grow and have a competitive edge. If you study the greats, whatever you want to call it, that is something they all have in common. Is they always personally were trying to get better, whatever that is. They were trying to make their products better. They're trying to make their services better, trying to make whatever, and always looking through that prism. So that's definitely one of the keys. And then I think, as a leader of a culture or an organization, literally owning it in your mind's eye, being responsible for it, and not delegating the responsibility of that is critical. It's huge.
Wow. Well, I certainly have learned a lot from you today, Paul. Like taking mental notes, saying, "Okay, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to write that down." But there are a myriad of topics I'd love to continue with you, and some other, ongoing interviews that we have. I mean, just your parenting tales alone, the education. How do you create education? Culture from scratch. I mean, that's a fascinating subject for me, because I do believe education allows us to progress a lot quicker. So if we can get that right here, especially here in the United States, then we'll be better off. But Paul, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Love having conversations with you always.
Same.
And you will come back, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Great.
Especially if you have a panel. I really like arguing with people. So,
well, we have this virtual summit coming up. I'll be announcing it soon, but I think it's going to be along the topics of how to manage your emotions in this divisive world.
Oh, I like it.
Whatever that means to the expert that I'll be interviewing. Some people might be talking about parenting. Some people might be talking about, corporate leadership. Some people might be talking about healthcare, whatever that means. But until next time, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye now.
Bye.